All right, I'm going to call the meeting for the Poquoson Planning Commission Monday, August 15th, 2016 to order and ask you to stand and join me in the invocation, which will be the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. Amen. Amen. Now we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag and ask you to join us. Okay, thank you. First item tonight is the approval of the minutes for the regular session of July 18th, 2016. Do I have a motion to accept those minutes as written? Thank you, Gus. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thanks, Bill and Vicki.
Certainly. Ms. Dennixon? Aye. Mr. Godden?
Aye.
Mr. Titlow?
Abstain.
Mr. Clifton?
Abstain.
Mr. Travis?
Aye.
Chairwoman Shriver?
Aye.
Chairwoman Shriver, the motion carried by a vote of 3-2.
Thank you, Vicki. Okay, we now will open the audience for visitors, and as always, this is an opportunity to come to the podium and address the Planning Commission on items other than the public hearing items. If you have something that you would like to make the Planning Commission aware of, please come forward at this time and give us your name and address. All right, if no one has anything they wish to say in the audience for visitors, we'll go ahead and close that, and we will move on to the public hearing items. We have 3 tonight, and the first one on the agenda is a request by John B. Graham et al.'s property owner and Robert Moses, applicant, to amend the city's comprehensive plan for 2008 through 2028 by designating future land use for Poquoson tax map parcels number 27-00-00-0002 and 27-18-00-0002 from B2 Business to VC, Village Commercial. And Kevin, are you going to do the honors? And I think you're going to present presentation for all 3, even though we have to entertain them individually. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the Planning Commission. As Chairwoman Shriver mentioned, that there are 3 separate land use applications that are all tied to the same development proposal. As such, instead of separating them during my presentation because they're so interlinked and they all depend on the other, I'm going to present them to you at the same time. And in a nutshell, what is being asked is an expansion to the previously approved Fountains of Poquoson project. This project was originally approved back in 2012. At that time, the developer received permission to construct 3 mixed-use buildings, each with a footprint of about 4,800 square feet. 3 stories each, 3.5 stories each actually, with the first floor consisting of a commercial use and the top 2.5 floors consisting of residential uses. The first building is almost completely constructed. And it's my understanding that residential tenants will be moving in shortly. Additionally, we've received some signed permits for the commercial tenants as well. So the first building is identified as Phase 3. I'm going to be talking in phases during my presentation, and Phases 1 and Phases 2, which would be the other two mixed-use buildings that are already approved, are what has previously been approved. Phase 3 is going to be for the two additional mixed-use buildings and one commercial building, similar to what is already constructed. And Phase 4 is for 26 townhome units. This is the area that we're speaking about. It's directly south of Alpha Street, right across Alpha Street from Poquoson Commons, which is the Food Lion Shopping Center. Phase 1 is indicated by red, and our projector is not working well this evening, so everything's going to have a hint of pink in it. But hopefully you can follow along. For all intents and purposes, the zoning maps that I'm going to put up are going to be pretty useless to everyone at home and in the audience. But this right here is Phase 1. This will be Phase 2. As I mentioned, two more buildings very similar to what is being constructed now. Phase 3 is indicated by this blue area here. That's actually two separate parcels that the developer is under contract to purchase. I'll probably refer to those as the Graham parcels as well during my presentation, because they're owned by John Benny Graham as it currently stands. But both of these parcels combine for about 260 feet or so of frontage on With Creek Road. And these parcels will be a part of the first two requests that you'll have public hearings on tonight. The first being a future land use map amendment to change the land use designation of these properties. Presently, they're designated for general commercial use. The applicant, in order to facilitate his rezoning requests, is asking you to consider changing that designation to village commercial. The village commercial district is immediately adjacent to its west, going towards the city's EDA pond. So that's the first two proposals you hear this evening, is the land use map amendment and a rezoning request. Presently, they're zoned for B2 use, business commercial, which is our With Creek Road business corridor. The applicant is asking that you consider changing its zoning designation to village commercial as well. So they sound very similar, but one is a land use map amendment and one is a rezoning. And as we've done in the past, to align everything at the time of consideration, we're bringing both requests before you. This long parcel, you can't see. It's green on my screen. It's some sort of wonderful Technicolor on the monitor there, on the projector. But it's a long, narrow parcel that essentially mirrors the former EDA parcel, EDA-owned regional pond. But it's really long and narrow, and due to its configuration, there aren't a lot of practical uses for it. However, Mr. Moses, the owner of the Fountains of Poquoson LLC, purchased this property back in 2012, not long after he received your approval for Phases 1 and 2. And in our conversations with him, his intent all along has been to develop this parcel for townhome use because of the small lot size needed. Obviously, the village commercial at that time did not allow for that type of use. However, not terribly long ago, we amended the village commercial district to allow for a separation of commercial and residential uses. The ratio is pretty much the same as it was before when it had to be within the same building, 1-to-1 by right. So for every square foot that you develop of commercial space, you're allowed 1 square foot of residential space. However, with a conditional use permit, you are permitted up to a 2-to-1 ratio. So 2-to-1 residential to commercial space. So basically not to exceed 66% of the entire development space. You see this on the screen now. These are the phases. However, upon approval of this, and certainly before we review a site plan for the development in its entirety, these lines will no longer exist. It'll be one parcel. We will consider it one development. We may still look at them as phases, but for all intents and purposes, it will be one development, and the ratio yield is for this one development. It is important to note now, before I dig a little deeper into it, when originally approved, phases 1 and 2 have slightly higher residential ratios. They did receive a conditional use permit. However, there's a loft area, basically a half floor, which is permitted within the Village Commercial District. So that ratio, for all intents and purposes, was the same. However, you'll notice the percentage of residential for phases 1 and 2 is a little higher. I think it's actually about 74%. And that was in line with the ordinance before we changed it and allowed for the separation. So as I mentioned, there are three separate parcels involved in the request from the applicant. The first two being the phase 3. In which he's requesting the land use map amendment, as well as the rezoning. Phase 4 will consist of the 26 townhome units, and the grand parcels, phase 3 as well as phase 4, the applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to exceed the 1-to-1 ratio up to the 2-to-1 ratio. Presently, the grand parcels are zoned B2, and they would require that rezoning to VC, as I mentioned earlier. However, phase 4, that parcel is already zoned appropriately, so it's zoned village commercial. This kind of is just a little table that breaks down the request, who the owners of the properties are, and what their current zoning and proposed zoning. All of them will require that conditional use permit, but only the grand parcels, phase 3, require rezonings. This is a similar map to what I just showed you. I was going to be very map heavy because this is a complicated request. But once again, the projector is not agreeing with us. So, but I think even those at home can see the differentiation with the lines around those phases. So that L-shaped is the phase 1 and 2, and then down that square consisting of almost a flag shape, and then a smaller rectangle, that's phase 3, and then the long narrow piece is phase 4. And this is what it'll look like when it's all done, when all the property lines are vacated. Here's a zoning map. This shows a little better than I thought. Still really hurts the eyes, but it's not bad. You can see, you can't differentiate the red from the orange at all, so that's not going to help. I'll just skip over this. But we all know that the 2 grand parcels need to be rezoned from B2 to village commercial. Here is the layout given to us by the Fountains of Poquoson, the developer. It'll go from the 3 buildings currently approved that received their approval back in 2012 to 6 total buildings, 5 of them being mixed use, commercial on the bottom. On the second, third and a half floors, a little loft area, those will be residential units. Building 6 is going to be fully commercial, retail, office space, and that's a good thing because that is the building that will be closest to With Creek Road. And one of my concerns about this application is bringing the Village Commercial District all the way to With Creek Road. We presently have that buffer of about 275 feet before it gets there. The Village Commercial, the intent of it is to attract low to moderate impact users and not necessarily be a large-scale attraction. Certainly doesn't require the visibility that the B2 district users would, being on With Creek Road. This is an addendum to the conceptual plan provided to us by the developer. Initially, the proposal called for 32 townhome units. We noticed that for Phase 3, which is that full Phases 3 and 4 combined, they would have exceeded that allowable ratio. I believe it was 69%. So the developer eliminated 6 townhome units to get to that 66% that would be required for Phases 3 and 4. This is zoomed in a little bit. You can see this pretty well on the screen, but this is the layout as proposed by the developer, and you can see that we have those very like buildings, 6 of them in total, one of which will be fully commercial. You'll also see on this that near With Creek Road, there's a little area outlined in red. It's dashed. It's actually non-tidal wetlands. So there's a good portion of non-tidal wetlands at the front of this property. It's my understanding that they will not be impacted as a part of this development or minimally impacted. Any impacts will have to be presented to the Army Corps of Engineers for their approval as they have jurisdiction over those. All right, so the land use map amendment and the rezoning. I hope at this point everyone kind of understands what the asks are here. There are 3 separate land use applications, all surrounding the same development proposal, but they're 3 separate parcels. So, as I mentioned earlier, the rezoning would need to be facilitated by a land use map amendment. That's basically you as the Planning Commission recognizing or agreeing with the applicant that the best use of this property is village commercial and not for general commercial purposes. So, as I mentioned, there are some wetlands on the Phase 3 piece near With Creek Road. Those would obviously have to be mitigated if any impacts are proposed. Even though there's a large residential component of this development, review by the Architectural Review Board would be required, as was the case during the original 2 phases. Traffic, this would be quite the traffic generator, but the level of services, particularly at the Alpha Street and With Creek Road intersection, are projected to remain the same. However, at its peak, the PM peak hour, which is generally our highest traffic time in the city, about 284 PM peak hour trips will be generated at full build out. So that pretty much wraps up my presentation. We do have a list of staff conditions for really the rezoning application as well as the conditional use permit application. I'm not going to read them verbatim. They're long. Essentially what we have for the rezoning application, or what the staff has come up with, if you agree to move forward with these, is 7 conditions for the rezoning application. Those would cover things like the layout that was submitted, that any development that moves forward would have to generally be in agreement with what we received as a part of this application. Additionally, as proposed, the development proposes about 8.5 units per acre over the entire acreage, which is about 7 3/4 acres in total. So staff is suggesting that no more than 9 units per acre be permitted. We felt that was needed because generally within the village commercial district, it's accepted that 12 units per acre, up to 12 units per acre is acceptable. So as a part of this rezoning application, we really wanted to hammer that point home. Additionally, that the approval does not grant the ability to develop these parcels individually. The property lines need to be vacated, and as a part of that, I don't want to mix these up. What's going through? That's on the conditional use permit, so I'll touch on that in a second. But within 200 feet from the With Creek Road, right-of-way line, that all the development within that area must remain commercial, so that residential cannot creep onto With Creek Road as a part of this approval, or as a part of this development. Additionally, that setbacks from With Creek Road and the parcels not zoned VC Village Commercial, those must be consistent with the B2 district. And what that means is from With Creek Road, additionally, there's the George's Restaurant on the north side and the Dollar General store on the south side of it. So they would have to maintain, even if it's rezoned to Village Commercial, on those property lines, have to maintain the B2 district setbacks, which is important because the Village Commercial District is a zero lot line development. So we would be protecting those businesses on each side. Additionally, Phase 4, the townhomes, they must be developed last. The developer must provide us the commercial space as promised before any construction of the townhome units is going to be permitted. And lastly, this is condition number 7 for the rezoning conditions, that all improvements are subject to site plan approval. So that your recommendation and ultimately City Council's approval of this request, if that's the way they choose to go, does not constitute any approval that's not consistent with our land use regulations. So getting into the conditional use permit conditions, and I'll certainly be available for any questions when we're done, that the right-of-way dedication in front of the townhome piece be made to the city. Ultimately, that we get the required right-of-way needed to improve Alpha Street. And that the developer provide those improvements consistent with what's required by VDOT. ARB approval would be required. The development must be constructed and fully operational within 5 years. That's consistent with their last conditional use permit. If you think 5 years is too short, you certainly can amend that if you wish. The 9 units per acre, again, that's what this development's being held to. All conditions from the previous approval of the Phase 1 and Phase 2 pieces shall be adhered to, so this doesn't circumvent or trump those. The trash containers must be shielded from public right-of-way, consistent with ARB regulations and consistent with the site plan ordinance. Local, state, and federal permits shall be obtained. The City Council can revoke this permit at any time if it's not being operated in compliance with any local, state, or federal law. And lastly, all applicable land use regulations are adhered to. The site plan will be required, site plan review will be required of this application. But just really quick before I end, just to put this in perspective, what the applicant is asking for this evening is an additional 37,000 square feet of commercial space and an additional 74,000 square feet of residential space. And that's on top of what has previously been constructed. And if I'm not mistaken, I had that on my first slide here. Presently, those 3 mixed-use buildings have commercial square footage of 14,000 square feet and 41,000 square feet of residential. So that concludes my presentation. I understand this is a very complex application or applications, but I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Additionally, the developer is in the audience and would be certainly willing to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Before you sit down, does anyone have anything particular they'd like to ask Kevin before we open the public hearing?
Kevin, I do have a question. In terms of the economic development stormwater retention pond, which is behind the premises, will the developer have any ongoing maintenance requirements with that?
With the previous phases, he was required to buy into that pond, essentially, work out a deal with the Economic Development Authority, who owns it. And he has. They've come to an agreement where he pays in to use it annually. At this time, we're not sure what the capacity is for that pond remaining. So we'll have to talk to the engineer about that. And I'm not sure what his maintenance, if I'm not mistaken, his paying into it will allow the EDA to continue maintenance. At least that's for phases 1 and 2. Upon site plan submittal, the engineer will work and consider whether that pond has more capacity or if other methods are needed, like an additional stormwater pond on that site. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Kevin, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing on this request. If anyone wishes to speak for or against, please come forward and give your name and address.
Hi. Angie Emmett for Lakeview Drive, Poquoson. Well, I'd like to start off by congratulating Mr. Moses on near completion of Phase 1. I know that he wants to expand the scope of this project, and he originally applied for the permits in 2012, and I know that Phase 1 is near completion. Phase 2 is not yet complete. I remember driving by often and seeing the sign, Fountains of Poquoson, to be completed winter of 2012. And for several years I would drive by and I'd go check the website, and I honestly thought that it was dead in the water. I know that he had recently applied for a amendment for his conditional use permit, I believe for phases 1 and 2, to extend the construction deadline to June of 2019. And I know that there were circumstances and the engineering team took longer than anticipated. And I would assume that there have been some lessons learned, that some of the kinks have been worked out. I would really like to see how phase 2 does complete before seeing the scope of the project be expanded. Also, I know that the geometry of those parcels, it's a challenging geometry back there. With the village commercial, I know it's intended to encourage the establishment of a village center where you have the uniform streetscape and you have the traditional neighborhood development. I do think that commercial should be the focus of village commercial and not necessarily an afterthought. And I know that that's hard with that long stretch, that parcel, to develop the townhomes. It just seems like those townhomes and the pond almost bifurcate one half of the village commercial with another half. And so you end up with a little peninsula of village commercial on the street front of Wythe Creek. I do have some concerns about the village commercial district butting up against Wythe Creek. I know Kevin addressed some of those concerns. But I know if I looked at the zoning map in the future and I see this little peninsula of village commercials among all of the business and commercial, I would just question why that was there. And like I say, I just want to make sure I know that those townhomes can be there. I know he wants to maintain that 2-to-1 residential and commercial. It's challenging geometry. I just don't want the commercial section of that to be an afterthought and to have any awkward usage of parcels to be a byproduct of that. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and close this first public hearing, and the Planning Commission will take it under consideration. Looks like some deep thinking there on some faces. Does anyone have anything they would like to?
I do do have a question of the developer, if I may.
Certainly. Do you want him to come up to the podium, Lee, so we can hear possibly a little better? Thank you, Mr. Moses. Thank you.
I was wondering if you could describe your market research for the commercial building that you're proposing for the 3 stories on West Creek Road.
Okay, what I've already got a letter of intent to occupy the downstairs by 2 doctors' offices. So I'd say it's pretty good. And I've got letters of intent to occupy the entire downstairs of Building 3. I've got letters of, well, I've already got tenants in all of downstairs of Building Number 1. I don't think we're going to have any problem getting rid or having leases in the commercial space.
I was really interested in the, I believe it's building number 6 in phase 3, which is going to be, I understand, a 3-story commercial
correct.
building.
All office building. The city does not have such an office building. This is the closest thing it has to it, and the city occupies it, the building
You're
you're in right now.
anticipating it to be more of a medical building?
Downstairs, yeah, it was going more office than anything else. We don't need it to be retail. We've got enough retail. The city really needs a multi-story office building. We just don't have one.
This would be a first for 3 stories in this in the city.
Right.
Any other questions for Mr. Moses while he's here?
I got one comment about the wetlands. We already have a nationwide 18 permit from the Army Corps to allow us to encroach into the maximum allowed of the non-tidal wetlands, which is 1/10 of an acre per development. So that's all we're going to do, and the plan shows exactly where we're going to encroach. Little small out ditches or whatever that were once man-made were considered wetlands. Those are some of the areas that'll be taken for development. I'm sorry.
The pond fills up in a
Jay.
really swamp. The pond fills up in a big rainstorm. Does it eventually flow into what's the creek that goes under the highway? Is that how it gets out?
I don't know that it'll do that. We plan to, in the development, we want to get the finished floor up above the base flood elevation, just like we did in phase 1. So, but in the street it might. I don't know. It won't be because of the development. It'll just be that water is going to flow where it's got the path of least resistance.
Okay, I just remember that in previous storms, it seems like the area all around the shopping center that's there right now has been really sensitive to really getting too much water. I hate to see these nice new buildings have the same thing happen to them.
Yeah, we will be raising the property just like we did next door in phase 1 by a few inches to get it above the base flood elevation. So we don't expect the residents to have to deal with floods. We expect the buildings to be outside the flood zone.
Okay. It almost seems like the nature, as a meteorologist, almost seems like the nature of the flooding that could occur here would almost be not tidal. It would be more of, historically, this area is flooded more in big rainstorms than anything else. And so I just want to,
Yeah, one of the things that's happening, maybe I should turn the mic off. There's the source of the stormwater is not self-generated on the property. It's coming from an adjacent property whose gutters on the building shoot out into that property, and then there are 2 storm drains within the property installed by the city when Wythe Creek was widened. Those were not maintained, and so that combined with all the water coming in from the adjacent property owner created the wetlands. If you saw how we designed the way into the property, we will eliminate that issue. Their water will have to stay on their property.
that's good. We have a house on Alpha Street, and during Hurricane Floyd, it flooded due to the rainfall, not the tidal flood. So
Yeah.
just didn't want to see that happen
Yeah, the
again.
water needs to go somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
So we've cleaned out the storm drains on the property, and so the development should help it considerably.
Bob, there are no ponds on your proposed plan. I'm assuming you're expecting everything to be able to go to the EDA pond.
Right.
But we're not yet 100% sure of the capacity of that.
I gave a request to the EDA over a year ago now that this was coming, so I think the calculations just need to be there's so many acres still allowed in the pond based on the old calculation. I don't think the new calculation has been, where you have to consider everything that's not or impervious. You have to now consider grass and the other things too, and I don't know those calculations have been run. I think that's what we're waiting on, is the site plan to be formalized, and then look exactly what we're asking of the pond in terms of capacity, and then the EDA can determine that with the city engineer.
All right, but you have a very, pretty well laid out plan that utilizes every inch of your properties. So what is your mitigation if that pond can't handle all that you're planning to develop?
I'm not sure. That hasn't been indicated to me that the pond could not handle. I understand that. So I can only do my part up to the line, which is show what I plan to do. Hopefully I'll get an answer back. For phases 1 and phase 2, it was determined that as long as we didn't exceed like 68% impervious cover or whatever, the pond was fine with that acreage. So, but I don't know if that's changed any. My understanding is from an engineer who's been involved in this project that the pond has plenty of capacity.
I guess my concern is if it does not have the capacity to handle it, we really don't have a means to mitigate that without greatly affecting what we're trying to agree to here, because it would affect your ability to possibly develop one of these buildings, which would then affect all your percentages and potentially throw everything out of compliance. So I hear what you're saying, that you've been told, but we haven't got anything official, and that concerns me a lot.
The Hunt parcel phase 4 has room for a pond. Since there's only going to be 26 townhouses, there's room in the back for a pond if it's needed, so that the townhouses would self-serve.
This layout shows 32. It's outdated.
Yeah, get rid of one of the 6 segment buildings, and pond will go nicely back there. That's the downhill end of that long parcel anyway.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was asking for, was what was your mitigation plan? It sounds like you have one.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, nobody has any other questions. Mr. Moses, we'll let him sit back down and continue on here.
What does the obligation, in other words, it seems like his is okay, but I know that there's the Dollar General, and then there's the storage place, and that's almost all concrete, that storage place. So whose obligation is it to make sure, in other words, each person could say, hey, my plot has plenty of, this all runs somewhere. And so what worries me actually is not the new stuff, but right next to it, these 2 existing places are ripe.
That's not Mr. Moses's problem.
Right, but I mean, it'll be somebody's problem. Everybody's up to their belly buttons in water.
Yeah.
Now, I think the good news is there's a creek right to the left of the storage place. So I guess if things are done properly, you could all exit into that creek. You don't quite see it on here, but I believe there's a creek that runs under the road. Yeah, Oxford, yeah.
It's Oxford Road Ditch, runs right there. And that portion's titled. So during large storm events, northeaster events, that would be pretty high as well. But the pond does feed, goes there, goes right under it.
Any more discussion?
I'll just mention, if I may, before we go, and I'm certainly not going to put Mr. Moses in that kind of a spot. I wouldn't do that. But I've mentioned this in other proposals, and I mentioned it again. I still have some concern about all of this commercial and where the heck do the people come from. We have empty, unused space in the city now, and if we're talking about being able to bring in new users, that's one thing. If we're talking about doing what Tech Center has done to Oyster Point, and that is basically moving users from one property to another and leaving properties empty, we're actually creating a problem. Now, that's not your question, nothing you could possibly answer to that, but I would simply say that it's something that it raises concerns for me. It's just where these tenants are going to come from.
I think, though, that's part of the benefit of this proposal, is it takes a B2 and turns it into a mixed use versus only commercial. So I hear exactly what you're saying. To be honest, I'm more concerned about all the rooftops that we've been approving lately.
Yeah, I would think also with the doctor's offices that if there are other buildings, they may be associated to that. In other words, a drugstore or something that's related to that type of thing. And since we have somewhat of an aging population, hopefully folks will be able to, that would be the type of thing that would come in there, so you wouldn't have to drive real far to fill a prescription. I know we may get another drugstore, but hospital supply stuff or something like that, I would envision that could be related to the doctor's offices.
All right, so what are we prepared to do with this first request? Make a motion to accept, or what are we prepared to do with it?
Just as a reminder, the first request is going to be for the land use map amendment, changing the zoning designation from general commercial to village commercial.
Not zoning designation, but the future land use map designation. Not to be confused with the reasoning purpose.
But there seems to me to be little need to do any of these unless we do them all. Is that right? I mean, yeah.
Exactly.
I guess the question is it required to change the land use map in order to do a conditional use rezoning?
If you do not change the land use map in the comprehensive plan, then the zoning is not consistent with the comp plan. So that's the reason why the two accompany each other.
Yeah, I understand that. My concern is this is one particular, I'm looking at, this is fine, this is great, we may go for this now, 20 years from now. We're now then having to look at changing the zoning map again if that's not what we want there anymore, versus perhaps this is not the long-term solution, and are we painting ourselves into a corner?
That's certainly a valid question. And I guess to answer your question, it's not necessarily required. It's more so a procedural measure that allows everything to be clean. It's the reason we present these first, because there's this clear acknowledgement that this is what the property should be used as before you delve into a rezoning request when you're looking solely at development proposal. It's important to consider it as a part of the plan, but in order to approve a rezoning, you don't necessarily have to be in line with the comp plan. It's obviously preferred, but it doesn't have to be consistent.
Yeah, I understand Richard's question. I guess my comment would be, we remember about a year ago, there was a tremendous amount of discussion going on in the city about inconsistencies in the comp plan and things not agreeing with the comp plan. I realize it wasn't this particular case, but I would really rather not put ourselves in a position where we have to face something like that again. So I really do think that we want everything to be in line. It just seems to me that it makes sense. If we're going to do it, I think it should be done across the board in all intents and purposes.
I think it makes the comprehensive plan update process much more complicated if there's inconsistencies. And if you find that the land use map it's not appropriate to change the designation, then it's not appropriate for the rezoning as well. Because once the property is developed based on that zoning, it's going to be there for the next 20 years.
And that's a potential burden that Mr. Moses now as the developer or any future property owner would have kind of hanging over their head. They've developed it for a certain reason under a certain zoning designation that is not necessarily consistent with the comprehensive plan that could potentially change at any time.
So what's an example of something that would happen? I'm trying to envision how this could rear its ugly head. In other words, that they're not the same. What would be an example? Conceptually, I see why it's nice everything's the same. But if the land use is different than the zoning, what would be?
Something that could happen, and well, this may not be the best example, but he builds the development as proposed. And this would actually be not necessarily a concern, but probably for the better, but it's developed as proposed in his plan, and we still have the entire parcel or the collection that he's asking for the rezoning designated in the comp plan as general commercial. We recognize that during an update or just general maintenance of the comprehensive plan and pursue rezonings of these properties to align them with their designation. In this case, that could potentially, if there's any residential portions on that, lead to a legal non-conforming structure. And then there are a slew of potential burdens that property owners can have with that. We discussed it not long ago with the amendments to the general commercial district when we required a conditional use permit. If people are refinancing, I just wrote a zoning verification letter today for a property owner in the city who's refinancing, and they want to make sure that it's in compliance with its zoning district. If it's not, does it have a conditional use permit to operate within its zoning district? So there are a slew of potential legal issues, and that's one of the reasons we do this with the comp.
Appreciate that, and now I know exactly. I've had the same thing happen at one of my properties. It's like on this on the retention pond things. The retention pond can go, and the whole concept of the neighborhood can go from beautiful to terrible if it's not being upkept. In other words, the retention pond's a place for mosquitoes. It could just be not a very attractive place to be, or it could be the centerpiece of the community. It could be beautiful. Who takes care of that? Who makes sure all that happens? And the other thing is, as things are built, it kind of has a little bit of a patchwork approach, here. And so I think if people don't feel comfortable wanting to go there to spend their free time or to go take a walk or things like that, I'm having a hard time struggling with exactly what this is going to look like when it's done. Like the new phase 1 that's done, it's pretty, but it's hard to envision to me. And so it could very well be a place that's a city showcase in the center of town, or it could not. And I don't know why I'm complaining about this, but something I could see that give me a little more vision or something of, like, I don't know, maybe this is a projector. I mean, where's pavement? There's a lot of parking spaces around here. I'm still a little concerned about the excess potential rainfall, but I don't really want to get in the way of it because I think it's generally a nice thing.
That's clearly what the development would look like a bit more purple. Mr. Moses, do you have the renderings of the townhomes?
I think we saw some things that are previously moved. I did see those. It's not really the look of a town. I'm curious how it all lays out. And to be honest with you, the newer buildings look a lot more attractive than some of the existing ones. I mean, like the storage area that's right there.
This is the view from the pond, proposed. And from City Hall through the woods, not that you could see it, this is the front, where you see the garage doors. And these townhouses are proposed to provide a one-car garage and a little storage behind it.
What's going on in the other direction, too? In other words, behind the townhomes, is it a legacy encroaching from that side, or?
There would be one parcel in between that's currently undeveloped, between what would essentially be Alpha Street extended there and the brewery that you all discussed at your last meeting. But there would be a parcel very similar in shape to that townhome piece in between.
So if you live at the townhomes on the far one side, you'll come up this new street and then take a right onto Alphas and take another right to get out.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I mentioned it in the staff report.
Okay, so what are we going to do with this?
I would recommend moving to accept update of the comprehensive plan to village commercial.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Vicki, would you take the vote on that?
Mr. Travis?
Aye.
Mr. Clifton?
Aye.
Mr. Titlow?
Aye.
Mr. Godden?
Aye.
Mrs. Fenixon?
No.
Chairwoman Shriver?
Aye.
Chairwoman Shriver, the motion carried by a vote of 5 to 1.
Thank you, Vicki. All right, with that, we will move on to the next request, public hearing on a request by John B. Graham et al.'s property owner and Robert Moses, applicant, to rezone approximately 2.37 acres of property located on the west side of With Creek Road, immediately to the south of George's Restaurant, specifically identified as Poquoson tax map parcels number 27-09-00-0002 and 27-18-00-0002 from B2 Business to VC Village Commercial. And we've already had Kevin give us the presentation. So does anyone have any questions of Kevin before we move on to the public hearing? All right, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing on this request. Does anyone have anything they would like to come forward and speak about on this one? Okay, if not, we will close this public hearing and the Planning Commission will take this one under consideration. All right, any thoughts or questions concerning this one?
I think our discussion was already had, so I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval.
All right, and we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Gus. Vicki?
Mrs. Fenixon? Mr. Godden?
Aye.
Mr. Titlow?
Aye.
Mr. Clifton?
Aye.
Mr. Travis?
Aye.
Chairwoman Shriver?
Aye.
Chairwoman Shriver, the motion carried by a vote of 5 to 1.
Thank you, Vicki. All right, the last item, public hearing item, is a request by John B. Graham et al.'s property owner and Robert Moses, applicant, for a conditional use permit to allow residential dwellings above the second floor in a mixed-use building and to allow residential separate from a commercial and/or mixed-use structure not to exceed 2/3 of the commercial floor area of the development in the Village Commercial District, pursuant to Article 11, Section 11-3 of the city's zoning ordinance for the properties located immediately to the south of George's Restaurant, identified as Poquoson tax map parcels number 27-09-00-0002 and 27-18-00-0002, and a parcel located immediately south of the Poquoson Common Shopping Center and west of the Economic Development Authority's Regional Stormwater Pond, specifically identified as tax map parcel number 27-01-00-0087. Okay, if no one has any questions of Kevin or Debbie on this one, do you? Okay.
Yes. Kevin, as I recall, you said that before any of the townhomes can be developed, all of the other phases must be complete?
Yes, sir. With complete being the issuance of a certificate of occupancy.
Is there a particular level of occupancy that will be required before any of that construction can begin?
No, just it can be completed in shell form as long as he has the certificate of occupancy for the structure.
Can we put a restriction to have a minimum occupancy?
Absolutely, whatever you all deem appropriate.
would you like to suggest, Rich?
Minimum 2/3.
Is that agreeable with the other members of planning, or would you have a suggestion?
2/3 residential and commercial? 2/3 of all
Next.
square footage?
Yeah, I think that's what I'd like to see, because frankly, I hope from his standpoint, he's not going to develop more residential until he's got his residential occupied. But what I want to see is the commercial occupied before we keep adding residential.
Is that going to apply to the mixed-use buildings, which will have the residential? Remember, you're going to have 2 buildings with residential above the commercial, and then you'll have 1 building with 3 stores of commercial.
I'm looking at the total development. 2/3 of the total development, not counting the townhouses, of course, because they're not developed, but having occupancy before developing the townhomes. What I don't want is a whole bunch of shell out there, sitting there empty, and just more going up. We need to make sure that we're getting, and it's in his best interest. It's going to happen, I would expect, before he'd want to do that anyways. But we need to make sure we're occupying buildings, not just building them. And I have no problem if Bob looks like he has something he would like to say, so.
Okay, I don't have a problem, Bob, if you'd like to come to the podium.
One of the things that the commercial folks like is that there's, how do I want to say, undivided audience by having the residents around. That's one thing that seems to be working very well with new commercial entities coming in and taking a risk. The 2 businesses right now in Building 1 are new to Poquoson, and they're coming there because of the promise of people upstairs and living there, residents coming home and will frequent their establishments. So I don't mind any ratios as long as it's fair to the commercial folks who are counting on mouths to feed or patrons who are going to be living next door or upstairs. So
I fully understand, and that's exactly what I think we're trying to accomplish, is that before we still add more rooftops, we have occupancy of the existing rooftops as well as occupancy of the commercial.
Right.
So I think we are looking for that balance.
Yeah, so I'm all in favor of a balance. What I would like to see is that as more people move into the residential components, more businesses take a chance on those people being there. So any ratio or balance I'm in favor of. I just don't want the cart and the horse to be swapped. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, because it does seem to me when you look at the different buildings and the layouts here, the one thing about Building 1 that's nice, if I'm a commercial guy, is people can see my frontage here. And so when you get to 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, there's going to be a Dollar General in the way of 5 kind of from the store, and there'll be George's will be in the way of 4 and 3 a little bit, and the bank will be here. And so 6, that one building will be totally commercial. That'll have a good frontage to the thing. But I'm thinking it might be hard to con some of these folks, other than maybe doctors, who have been going to some of these buildings in the back, because you're not going to be able to see them from the storefront. I think a lot of people will drive by. That'll be a concern of mine, to see that they get in there.
Okay.
Building 3, well, let me start. Building 1, we have a before and after care center. She is convinced that her care center is going to do very well, and she's already given a letter of intent to occupy all the downstairs of Building 3. Now, she doesn't need a neon sign going off because she's going to be a before and after care. So being nested right there, kind of away from everything in the middle of the development, is actually a good thing for her to have all the downstairs. And so we're looking forward to that happening. So, but you're right, you're absolutely right. Say a Pizza Hut coming back into town, they like to be more visible, but they wouldn't want Building 3. But we have people who would.
No, I agree with you, and I think that's why one of the things I'm concerned here is the walkability of all this thing too. If this is going to be a commercial center, I think if that's the case, I think business would definitely come in to see the ability. People could walk and go over to the retention pond, walk around that after they're done eating or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's done right. I think it's an excellent idea.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so now what I'm hearing is that we want to make a motion with the changes. Who we would have someone willing to do that?
Yes, now, have the conditions that the planning department has already put onto the special use are included in what we have here in front of us, correct?
Yes, that was
The conditions that you have already put onto the special use permit request are included in the recommendation?
Yes, they're included in the recommendation, and you certainly have the capability to add additional or amend those in any way you want to see before you make your recommendation to City Council.
And I will make a motion that we recommend approval with the additional condition that 2/3 occupancy is achieved in phases 1, 2, and 3 before construction begins on phase 4.
Okay, do we have a second of that motion as amended?
Can we quickly clarify phase 4? I mean, in other words, you're talking about the townhomes,
Phase
right?
4 is the townhomes.
Okay.
Seconded.
All right, Gus. Vicki?
Mr. Travis?
Aye.
Mr. Clifton?
Aye.
Mr. Titlow?
Aye.
Mr. Godden?
Aye.
Mrs. Stenickson?
No.
Chairwoman Shriver?
Aye.
Chairwoman Shriver, the motion carried by a vote of 5 to 1.
Okay, thank you. We have made these recommendations, and they will go to City Council as of what date? Do you know?
They will have a work session on the 22nd of August on these 3 requests. They'll hold a public hearing, if everything goes well, on September the 12th in front of council.
Okay, so they will make the final decision. The Planning Commission has recommended, and it will be their final decision that will be the one that counts. Okay, moving on to unfinished business, and we have a little item here, comprehensive plan update report. I have a feeling it's not a little item, it's a big item, but I'll say that. And to make it sound like it's not so awesome. All right, and Bill, did you, Lee, the one, Lee's going to tell us, okay?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, we have been grinding into midnight on our team, but very briefly, the community participation team has met twice since our last meeting, one on July 26th and the other one on August 10th, one at the Odd Road Community Center and one at the library. At the first meeting, we reviewed with the team the Freedom of Information Act requirements for notification of public hearings and also for convening the meetings, which we are full in compliance with. At the July 26th meeting, the mayor actually attended and briefed the team members and didn't stay for long, but it was nice to have his attendance there. The 2 teams that have been divided, one is the community data team, which will be action to look at a community-wide survey or surveys, plural. The other is the community engagement team, which will be soliciting community-wide input. The community data team right now is actually getting and trialing some questions through a focus group, and we hope to have some questions that will be coming out of that, which will roll into the survey. The community engagement team, the city has activated a website which will allow any citizen to provide comments online. It's actually paired with the Planning Commission. They have also scheduled the first community meeting for October the 18th at 7 p.m. They have also discussed having a table at the Seafood Festival to acquire input from citizens, and we're also looking at graphics and business cards at this point. There's 2 meetings that have been scheduled in the near future. week to week, back to backs, because we want to keep this thing rolling. And again, my thanks to our illustrious leader over there, Bill Travis, for keeping things going. But August 24th and August 31st, we will be meeting at the library at 7 p.m. And we're very excited. Things are really starting to coalesce. So,
If I may, just to add, maybe I should, but I won't have, but since you mentioned the two teams, I should mention that Ms. Emmett here is the chair of one of the teams, the data collection team. So we do appreciate her coming out to the meetings as well.
Very good. Sounds like y'all are moving right along, making steady progress, which is what we want. Thank you both for your report. We have some new business, which actually is some business that we put off last meeting because we didn't really feel like we had an adequate number of members. We had a quorum, but we wanted to include everybody, and tonight we have a good number here, election of officers. So tonight we'll go ahead and we'll take care of that. I know sometimes, Vicki, what we do is we take the nominations and then we just vote as a whole slate, I guess. Okay, all right. Is that the easiest way for you, or?
You can make a motion giving the whole slate of offices if you like to do it that way, or you can make nominations, at which time we'd have to vote on each nomination to do one at a time. It's entirely up to the commission's pleasure.
Okay, what would y'all like to do? I think we've just done it before, as we take a slate and just do it all at once. So what are your wishes? Do you have nominations?
I would nominate that Bonnie Shriver remain as chairwoman and that Bill Travis remain as vice chair.
I would second that motion.
I think we have to include Evie
And Vicki, Evie and Vicki.
And
too.
Evie and Vicki, I forgot that theirs
Okay.
are actually
Yeah.
elected
We-
positions.
You do
I
have
think
to
we
make
do,
some.
yeah. All right, so that would complete the slate. All right. We have a second. We have a motion and a second, so Vicki can go ahead and just take the whole
Certainly.
thing as one, Vicki. Make it easier for you.
Sure. Mrs. Stenickson? Mr. Godden? Mr. Titlow?
Aye.
Mr. Clifton?
Aye.
Mr. Travis?
Aye.
And Chairwoman Shriver.
Aye.
Chairwoman Shriver, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0.
All right, thank you, Vicki. All right, I guess that brings us sort of to the conclusion here, with the exception of the communications and correspondence and the status of the item from the July 18th meeting. Debbie, could you update us on that?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. City Council will be holding a public hearing Monday evening on the brewery request that you considered at your July meeting. And as Kevin had mentioned earlier, Mr. Moses' request that you considered this evening will be presented to City Council in a work session Monday evening. The process is now that we always hold, or we present land use applications in work session forms to City Council before the actual public hearing. And the good news that I'm so pleased to share with you this evening is that we have no applications for your September meeting. So right now, your meeting is canceled unless something big comes along. So you deserve a break. So enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy it. And I know Vicki, she's very happy about it as well.
Yes, we've really had no lapse, have we?
I don't think you've had a break in a year.
We haven't. No, we certainly haven't.
So you deserve it.
Let me ask you something, Debbie, on the item that we had on the property on Hunts Neck Road, on the Hunts Neck area, the subdivision. Is there any, I was just curious, any updates on that as to where that stands? We denied.
The subdivision variance request.
We voted it, as a not to recommend.
We have received no formal application for development. However, I have had conversations with the site designer that has expressed a desire to submit a development plan for a 3-lot subdivision at this point.
For the family?
Yes.
Which they do not need anything for that. I mean, they by right can do that.
Correct. No public hearing is required. However, we have not yet received that, but I'll keep you informed as to what the progress is on that.
Okay.
And then finally, if I could please, I'd like to compliment Kevin as well as the Planning Commission members. I think he did a really good job on a very complicated request this evening. It was very clear, and the reason why I knew it was very clear is because everyone on the Planning Commission caught on instantaneously. So it was more unique for us in processing, but I thought he did a great job, and I just wanted to compliment him and also compliment the Planning Commission as well. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, I certainly appreciate Kevin's work on that, because that, to me, that it was complicated, and he made it a lot more understandable to us. Thank you, Kevin, for that. I second what Debbie said, and I think everybody up here will stand in agreement on that. Now, with that said, let's go down the roll here and see if Lee has anything that she'd like to say before
Not at
we
this
close.
time, Madam Chairman.
All right, thank you, Lee. How about you, Gus?
No, ma'am.
All right, Jay?
No, but I do agree with y'all, and Kevin helped me clear up my questions quite a bit also, so thanks. I
Yeah.
third that.
Yeah. Rich?
Well, I'll extend it to the entire planning staff, but yes, Kevin, I especially appreciate Kevin's work, but the entire staff.
Yes. Bill?
Well, I will certainly echo that, and I'll also certainly say, although it really means nothing, is that, you could probably tell my vote was a little reluctant. I would have to say, from a personal perspective, I don't really think I care for this. But from my position on the Planning Commission and land use, I think it's my obligation to look at it from that perspective, and I certainly could not vote against it. So that's really why, if I sounded reluctant, that's kind of where I was.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And as always, thank everybody tonight for attending, and hopefully next month we won't see each other, but we'll miss each other, but I think we can do it for 1 month, and we've had enough of each other probably. But with that saying,